Before we start the video, make sure to subscribe to our channel, The Forgotten Files. Also, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. Alright, let's get started. It begins with a photograph. Faded, sepia-toned, edges curling with age, taken in Virginia, 1857. At first glance, it is unremarkable. A family of enslaved people standing before the estate of a man who wielded power like a silent tyrant. Yet, beneath the surface, the photograph holds a secret that no historian ever uncovered. Look closely. The eyes of the children, empty, almost hollow, seem to speak of things that were never meant to be spoken aloud. A shadow lingers behind them, impossible to trace, as if the air itself has remembered something long since buried. And in that shadow, a story begins, a story of betrayal, hidden horrors, and a darkness that stretches far beyond the plantation gates. The estate, sprawling and majestic, was the public face of wealth, refinement, and civility. But behind its whitewashed walls, the corridors held screams swallowed by centuries of silence. Servants spoke in whispers about the man who owned the land, a figure revered in town, yet feared in private. Late at night, families would report strange sounds, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, objects moving without cause, and the faint, low cry of children in rooms that should have been abandoned. No one outside the estate knew of the secret chamber beneath the main house, where the most vulnerable were hidden, locked away from sight, their lives erased in plain view. In that hidden chamber, children grew up unseen. Generations of eyes staring through barred windows into the garden that they would never touch. They were taught obedience, silence, and fear, but also something far stranger. Whispered knowledge of rituals, of words that could summon attention from shadows that lingered around the estate at night. The children's faces appear in photographs taken at carefully staged moments, always frozen, never smiling. Locals dismissed them as merely sad, but those who looked longer noticed patterns, hands clenched in identical positions, eyes reflecting a light that should not exist in this world. Decades later, a small, church-run orphanage opened near the town. The founder, a man revered for his piety, had once served on the estate as a caretaker. Strange coincidences marked the orphanage's early years, children arriving with familiar, hollow eyes. Journals left behind by caretakers detailing inexplicable events, doors that locked themselves, and shadows that seemed almost human. It was said the orphanage preserved something inherited from the estate, memories, perhaps, or a curse. Whatever it was, it whispered to those who were too young to resist, leaving marks in their sleep and haunting them as they grew. Nearby, a seminary quietly admitted students, promising spiritual enlightenment. Inside, the halls smelled of polished wood and incense, but the architecture held strange patterns, symbols carved into the walls that even the priests claimed not to remember carving. Students occasionally disappeared or left abruptly, claiming visions of children with hollow eyes calling them into shadowed corridors. The seminary seemed almost alive, a vessel of secrets inherited from the estate and the orphanage, an institutional memory of trauma and control that persisted beyond death. The town itself, modest and picturesque, thrived while hiding the residue of these events. Families with deep roots refused to speak of the estate, the orphanage, or the seminary. Shops and churches masked a history of exploitation and terror, stories passed in hushed tones that quickly ended when strangers arrived. Every year, as harvest season ended, there were reports of children wandering along the edges of the town, disappearing into the woods without explanation, only to return years later with vacant stares and unsettling knowledge. A diary discovered in a long-abandoned barn reveals fragments of what occurred in the estate's hidden chamber. The entries speak of children learning to see beyond before they even spoke, of objects moving on their own, of a man obsessed with preserving a lineage of observation. The language is cryptic, almost ritualistic, yet the fear is clear. These were not mere children, but witnesses, vessels for a secret so devastating that its discovery could unravel the town itself. Historians dismissed the diary as fiction, but the handwriting is unmistakable, the dates exact, the events detailed with terrifying precision. People who spent too long in the town report seeing something in their peripheral vision, something fleeting, humanoid but distorted. A lingering impression of the children in the photograph, or their descendants, who were said to have inherited the estate's darkness. Shadow patterns emerged in the architecture, as if the very walls remembered the rituals performed within them. Scholars of folklore noticed a repeating motif: eyes watching from nowhere, hands clasping invisible objects, whispers in languages no living person could speak. These shadows were not mere tricks of light. They were traces of trauma, encoded into the environment itself. The photograph resurfaced decades later in an archive, mislabeled, ignored, then rediscovered by a graduate student who felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. The eyes of the children seemed to follow him, leaving a lingering unease that he could not shake. Nightmares plagued him, visions of dark corridors, of children whispering names, of a presence that demanded recognition. The more he studied the photograph, the more he felt the estate's influence extending beyond its physical location, leaving scars on the minds of those who dared look too closely. The local church, long a pillar of morality, played an unspoken part in maintaining silence. Records show donations made in secrecy, a pattern of support for institutions that outwardly served children, but internally perpetuated trauma. Clergy members who questioned the practice disappeared from records, leaving gaps that historians cannot explain. Those gaps hint at something far older and more insidious. The church had inherited knowledge from the estate and preserved it, using faith to mask the suffering of the invisible children. Former orphans, now elderly, describe vivid memories of the hidden chamber. They recall chanting in voices that were not their own, seeing doors open to darkness, and feeling compelled to perform tasks they could not understand. Trauma, they say, was not enough to erase the experience. Even in adulthood, they carried fragments of the estate's secrets, instincts they could not rationalize, and a constant sense of being observed. Their recollections are fragmented, horrifying, and yet consistent. Several researchers investigating the estate, the orphanage, and the seminary vanished without trace. Letters left behind describe shadows moving independently, children speaking in tongues, and rooms that seemed to rearrange themselves overnight. Family members insist these researchers had been consumed by their curiosity, though no evidence remains to explain how or why. The archives retain only hints, partial journals, cryptic sketches, and photographs of children whose eyes appear older than they should. The estate's influence persists across generations. Descendants of the original family, as well as of those enslaved, display patterns of behavior that defy psychology, compulsions, prophetic visions, or unnerving empathy toward places and people they should not remember. Some refuse to enter the town entirely. Others feel compelled to revisit the photograph, the estate, the orphanage, and the seminary, drawn to a past that has never truly left them. The land remembers, and those who trespass carry that memory in ways science cannot measure. Historians examining the estate's ruins note an uncanny symmetry: hidden chambers, trapdoors, and corridors that converge into a single subterranean room. The design is not for comfort, but for observation and control, suggesting a calculated, decades-long plan to maintain secrecy. Patterns in the floorboards mirror the children's movements captured in the photograph, as though time itself had been choreographed to imprint the estate's trauma. Architecture here is not neutral. It is a vessel of the past's darkest intentions. Within the seminary, similar designs appear: walls that shift, hidden alcoves, symbols etched into wood that echo those in the estate. Students report hearing whispering at night, sometimes in languages no living soul should know. Some say the seminary feeds on curiosity, rewarding students who follow the whispers while punishing those who resist. Like the estate, it becomes a crucible for observing the human psyche under unnatural pressure, preserving knowledge that is as horrifying as it is forbidden. Generations of townsfolk act as unwilling guardians of the secret. Oral histories vanish when recounted to outsiders, stories fade, and those who probe too deeply are subtly ostracized. Community rituals disguise the truth. Festivals, harvest celebrations, and church ceremonies all function as a kind of collective denial. Silence becomes a safeguard, preserving the estate's legacy while preventing discovery. The town itself is complicit, an ecosystem of forgetting, where what is unseen is allowed to thrive. The photograph circulates once more, this time online. Its digital copies carry the same eerie pull as the original. Viewers report unease, visions in the corner of their eyes, and the sensation of being observed. Those sensitive to trauma or suggestion feel an almost magnetic draw toward the town, toward ruins, toward the long-hidden chambers that shaped the lives of children over a century ago. The past refuses to remain buried. It finds a way to surface, compelling recognition. Psychologists analyzing descendants and former residents note patterns of anxiety, dissociation, and obsessive tendencies. Dreams often depict corridors, shadowy figures, and children with hollow eyes. There is no simple explanation. The events of the estate, orphanage, and seminary seem to have imprinted themselves into neural pathways, passed down through observation, storytelling, and ritual. Trauma becomes a physical presence, a haunting that transcends individual memory. Those who study the estate come to a harrowing realization. Some knowledge is not meant for the living. The estate's horrors were designed to be concealed, to corrupt, to persist across generations. The children's photograph is a key, a warning, and a map of something older, something alive in the shadows of Virginia's past. Understanding it risks sanity. Ignoring it risks repetition. Every observer becomes part of the narrative, a participant in a story centuries in the making. Today, the estate is ruins, the orphanage abandoned, the seminary half-empty. Yet the darkness persists. The photograph remains, a testament to what was hidden, a relic of trauma and control. Visitors report the faintest whispers, the sensation of eyes on them, and glimpses of shadows where none should exist. The town continues its quiet denial. And somewhere, just beyond human perception, the children of 1857 wait, their eyes empty but remembering, guarding secrets that history was never meant to reveal. The photograph is not merely an image, it is a door, and once it is seen, it cannot be unseen.